One of the first things you'll learn in games like Valorant and Counter-Strike is to walk around with your crosshair at head level. You'll probably learn this around the first 100 hours of the game, but for the subsequent 300 hours after that, you'll be thinking about it, and you'll always readjust to keep your crosshair at head level. And from there, forever and always, you will have your crosshair at head level without even having to think about it. This is what we call muscle memory, and it's not exclusive to FPS games. It's not exclusive to gaming at all. This is just the best way I could think of presenting it. And I've been learning a lot more about muscle memory as it pertains to Street Fighter lately. Even though I've played 1,200 hours of Street Fighter, I've still put more time into Counter-Strike back when I was playing that game, 12 hours a day, right? I learned so much about it back then in terms of FPS, but now I'm learning even more things when it comes to fighting games. And in that way, in terms of the process that we have to take in order to get good at something, I think Valorant and Counter-Strike are much more similar to Street Fighter and Guilty Gear than we might think. And it's super interesting to me. And I want to talk about what I've learned this week and kind of the parallels that I've been drawing. Before I do, I'm trying to hit 10,000 subs. It's a very far away goal, but I really want to try and get there. So if you end up enjoying this video, please consider subscribing. And thank you so much for watching. When I load into an FPS game, I don't think about where my crosshair is. I don't think about how I hold my mouse. I don't think about how I move my mouse. All of that stuff is ingrained in me at this point. Over thousands and thousands of hours and thousands of games playing FPS games, whether it be Valorant or whether it be Rainbow Six or CSGO. All of those games serve the purpose of building my muscle memory over the years. And so now my mind is free to think about the rest of the game. And I think I'm almost getting to that point with Street Fighter. And it's an important milestone to hit because up to this point, I've been trying to micromanage every interaction, trying to space myself around every single button, which is not a bad way to play, but it's not it's not an effective way to play. It's not an efficient way to play. And so now when I load into a game, the first two things that I do is space myself in a place where I can react, sometimes based on the matchup, but sometimes just based on where I know I can react to things, because straight up close next to somebody, I'm not reacting to a fireball, I'm not reacting to the whiff button, I'm not reacting to anything. So I take my space, I walk back a little bit, or I walk forward a little bit, and keep a spacing that I'm comfortable at. And I do almost nothing, right? It sounds bad, but hear me out. I do very little to nothing and just see what happens. And nothing doesn't involve just sitting still and blocking. That's another misconception that I've had, is that when somebody says do nothing for the first round and just feel them out, I would just sit at a certain spot on the screen and block. That's not what doing nothing means. Doing nothing means you're just spacing yourself over and over again. That's kind of how I interpret it, or how I play the game, is I just keep respacing myself in a zone where I know I can react if something was to happen. And by doing nothing, it means that I'm not whiffing any buttons, I'm not doing any crazy special moves, I'm not taking any risk or any big risk. I'm just assessing the situation. There's three things that happen when you play like this. One is very common, right? One is that they get super wild, impatient, and they try and random you out. They start running at you, they start whiffing a bunch of buttons, they might start doing a bunch of unsafe special moves to try and get in, they start jumping a lot, they start throwing a bunch of fireballs, whatever. You're not giving them what they want, so they're trying to take it. And at this point, you can maybe play a little bit of a more preemptive game. You start pressing stand medium kicks or whatever, pokes to keep them out. Or maybe they throw a fireball, they're going to dash, you block the fireball, you press a button, you get a hit. You can shut down the wild play by just playing a little bit more solid. You don't have to play perfect Street Fighter. Nobody's going to ever play perfect Street Fighter. But just play a little bit more solid and put some emphasis on checking dashes and checking jumps and things like that. And you'll usually frustrate them enough to just win that way. The second approach is that they do exactly what you're doing, right? Monkey see, monkey do. And they just sit and block. I played a guy yesterday who did that. I was just kind of walking around out of his zone trying to see what he would do, and he was just chucking fireballs, 45 seconds of fireballs. And at that point, you become the aggressor. And if somebody is sitting there blocking, often you can dash up in their face and they will not react. Or you can just walk up and throw them, right? You play a different game. And the third response is they start playing somewhere in between. They start actually playing neutral and playing some footsies with you. And this is where all of that stuff that we've talked about on this channel comes into play, where you can actually play footsies with somebody. When they're walking in and out of your range, when they're trying to make your buttons whiff, and when you're making their buttons whiff, and you're playing this back and forth dance. It's not one guy running at you or one guy blocking the whole time. It's a real neutral game. And that's when the game is the most fun, but most times you're not going to get that in ranked, unfortunately. That's what my muscle memory has sort of taught me at this point, is the two things that need to happen when I load into the game is get to a space where you're comfortable to react to things, whether it's whiffing buttons, whether it's fireballs, whatever, jumps, dashes, and do the absolute bare minimum until otherwise. Until you have to do something other than block and punish, just do that. Because at the end of the day, what is your goal on any character? It's to score a knockdown, or to put the opponent in the corner, or get a knockdown in the corner, run your Oki, make them guess. Some characters are much better at doing that than others, but at the end of the day, that's our goal. And we want to take the path of least resistance to get there. Now, once you do get the knockdown and you get your Oki, that's a whole nother video and a whole separate topic, you know, pressuring your opponent and all that stuff. A completely separate topic. All we want to do is get ourselves in a position where we can reliably do that, and that's through muscle memory. What I've learned is that the game can neither be a completely read-based thing or a completely reactionary-based thing. It has to be somewhere in between. And by setting yourself up in you know, a space where you can react to the stuff is a way of doing both of those things. You know, I put myself at a space where I think he can throw a fireball or jump, and then I react to what happens. And eventually, when he jumps, you won't even need to react to what happens, because you'll instinctively see that he jumped and your body will do a DP motion. For me and for a lot of people, it's not like that. The only person who I can truly say is like that is Juices, right? If you ever played against that guy, it feels like he has a one-button DP, like he does not miss. But for me, and probably for a lot of you, it's still like a System 2 thing. It's still something that I have to think about. And in some matchups, it's tougher, right? Against Nash, they always like to do the somersault kick, but it's pretty slow. So you have some extra time to react and DP. But against Poison, with her little heal thing where she does quarter circle back kick, the EX one is very fast and super hard to anti-air if that's what you wanted to do, was anti-air it. Sometimes it's hard to even block because it's so fast. But this is just one of the areas of growth that you'll go through, for sure. You have to go through it. You'll build some form of muscle memory. Whether it's good or bad, you'll build a habit. And you'll either have to break it at some point, or it'll benefit you forever. These are also the sort of things that people are talking about when they say everybody learns at a different rate. If I learned to keep my crosshair at head level in the first 100 hours of Counter-Strike, and then, you know, by the 400th hour, I'm not even thinking about it anymore, that's great. But some people will play 1,000 hours of Counter-Strike with their crosshair aiming at the chest or even at the ground. And that's when you have a guy who's 1,400 hours deep into the game and doesn't really understand a fundamental aspect of it. There's nothing wrong. It's just he didn't know. And if maybe he learned this at the beginning, he'd be much further by now. Because once you've got one thing ingrained in your muscle memory, then you hope to build upon it and not forget about it. Oftentimes that does happen, though. When you have an influx of information, you just forget about everything that you learned over the past 300 hours, and you find yourself backtracking over and over again. So you just have to make sure to practice it and keep it in mind until it becomes so ingrained in you that you can't forget it, that you don't remember what you did before you learned this thing. That's really the key to everything. That's all I really got for you. I know I might have went off on a little bit of a rant or a tangent, but it's important stuff. I think it's important stuff, and it all fits together in the end. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this video helped you in some way, and if it did, please consider subscribing. I'll talk to you again very soon.